Should you be hitting it longer or should you be trying to hit it straighter? When it comes to driver fittings and testings and your golf, are we thinking about the right numbers? This number is often the number that defines and kind of shapes your scoring ability. This video might help you hit straighter drives and start thinking about in-play distance. So many of you have been testing, do test, bought new drivers, gone on the sim and made your choice based on a series of numbers and data. Now, a couple of questions I always get asked about, which is very relevant to today's video, like how many shots should you hit to get an idea of where your numbers, your data lies? Now, this is a tough question to answer. It's actually a really easy question to answer, but if you answer it correctly, it does make you go in the bad books of quite a few people. Let's just take a general rule from the cleverer people than me who look at numbers and statistics. You really want about 30 shots to really start to see some patterns. Now, 30 drives, well, if you're comparing driver to driver, we're now 60 drives without having a retest. That's not a realistic number. So instantly we see a slight flaw in the whole system of testing in golf equipment. It's so built around a selling experience, unfortunately, than it is an actual test, because to do the test properly, you're probably talking about over a week, and then there's just not enough margin in the product for pros to do it this way. So you get this kind of truncated, funny version. Now, there's obviously outliers in this idea as well. I mean, I'm someone who's hit many drives. I know where my number stops moving. So I know where my certain spins and distances and ball speeds and other numbers that we're going to talk about stop moving because I've hit enough shots. So I can get there sometimes in 6, 10, 12, 15 shots. I don't need to hit 30. But if you think about a player of higher variance, someone who is hitting a handicap golf for different parts of the faces, applying some different faces to pass, you're not going to get those numbers to really settle. It's at least 30 drives, isn't it? Now, once you've hit your drives and you're happy with your data capture within reason of what you can capture, what numbers should we really be looking at? So I'm testing this new driver from Strixon. I'm enjoying the ZX7 over the ZX5, for instance. And what number am I going to look at in all this data set, all these kind of many confusing things? Which one is the one that's going to sell it for me? Now, in the comments down below, when you go for driver fittings, what's the number that you're looking for? I mean, I would argue, and you post comments, just be honest down there, I'm going to say distance. You want your driver to go further, don't you? That's like the general idea of why you're trying something new. So we're then looking at this number, 279 is the average of all those drives, 160 ball speed, which is fine. I want that higher for me, but I'm sneaking some 162s. So, you know, it's all in a good place, spinning at 2.6. It's all these numbers that need to be dialed in. So you can see I have an average here, which is in the middle, but I also have an all of my shots number. So that's the average of all of them, and I'm missing left and right, which is the common pattern. If you haven't seen my video of left and right misses, maybe check it out. Let's just put some value on how far up these drives are going compared to maybe the ideas of how far left and right they're going. And are we really giving the good values to our custom fits? Are we looking at the right values when it comes to choosing our very expensive drivers? So what's the value of finding extra yards compared to finding extra fairways or extra balls in play? Now, I've got some shot scope data here, which I'll share with you. It's really interesting reading. So this is hundreds of thousands of shots taken by many different handicap players, so handicap groups from scratch up to 25 and plus, and it's also on course real data. It's their shots, what they're playing, not that sim style stuff, which obviously has its merit, but also when applied in a real world there's going to be more mess. But here's some interesting numbers for you. If we take 12 approaches ranging from 10 yards up to 220 yards, and let's take a 15 handicapper, so that middle bracket of handicap, 12 approaches, so from 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, 70 yards, 100 yards, 120, 150, 170, 200, 220 yards. Let's take that 12 approaches, barring your par 3s, into par 5s and par 4s in a round of golf. The value of hitting from the rough compared to the fairway, well, a 15 handicapper averages shots to complete the hole from the fairway at all those distances, 40.2 shots to finish the hole. Now, if they hit all those approach shots in the rough and they had those distances going in to finish, they average 41.73 to finish those holes. That's a difference of 1.53 shots, so 1.5 shots difference from getting all 12 of those drives in the fairway for those approach shots compared to hitting them in the rough. So there's value, isn't there, for hitting it more on the fairway, in play on the fairway compared to in the rough. But it's small, it's not massive, where if you compare, if we take a 15 handicapper and just take a random distance here of say 170 approach from the fairway, they average 3.81 shots to finish that hole. Now if they hit it 20 yards further and have 150 yards in, let's pretend it's now a bit harder to hit the fairway, the ball's going further, your start direction has to be that fraction tighter, that it's a different, slightly different skill. So we put them in the rough, they average 3.81 to get down. So they've gained 20 yards, but they're not gaining anything in their average score. Obviously, these are snapshots. There will be outliers outside of these numbers. So hitting the fairway compared to the rough, definitely there's advantage. But it's not massive. Hitting it 20 yards further is going to probably outweigh hitting fairway to rough in most cases. But let's look at this stat. This one is amazing. So let's look at the average penalty shots per 18 holes by handicap category. 5 handicapper and better average 0.84 penalty shots per round, less than 1 shot. 6 to 12 handicappers average 1.34, nearly 1.5 shots per round. 13 to 20 handicappers average 2.62, over 2.5 shots per round. 21 plus handicappers are averaging 4.01 penalty shots per round. You want to gain 4 shots. Gaining 4 shots is massive. Keeping that ball in play, so forget fairway and rough, in play, think standard deviation left and right, if you can bring that in, that's going to have huge values over finding, well, possibly up to 20 yards off the tee. It's amazing. Keeping your ball in play is such a massive skill for handicap golfers, yet we watch these driver reviews, we talk about distance, people want their driver to go further, it's all advertisers going further. You're out of standard deviation left and right. If you don't know that number and you're not trying to improve it, well, your penalty shots are going to go up, aren't they? So if we're putting a good amount of value on accuracy, and maybe, I mean, how much further can a driver go? I mean, again, outliers in this idea. If you're using a really old driver, there are gains to be had in a modern driver. So you could find 20 yards, 15 yards by going to a modern driver from something that's like way, way old. You could have changed your swing and your driver's built around your old delivery, so you could definitely find gains from different lofts and different fields in shafts, different lengths, all the things that can affect distance, and you could find 10, 15 yards. But if we take it as a given, just for this example, someone like myself who's hitting modern equipment for the last X amount of years, yeah, I'm not seeing gains in distance apart from what I put in. We're talking 5 yard, 4 yard, 6 yards. And you can see the value in that in north and south being kind of not worthless, but minimal. Now, east and west value, we should be looking at this number. This is the key one that so many are not looking at. So my offline number here, so I'm averaging 279, it's got 160 ball speeds, like I said, 2.5 spin, all in a good place, launching at 14.7. So driver like for like, you hit these numbers, I'm going to be moving this. Well, you can see my standard deviation is 8 yards of 279. So I can hit it around 270 and around 290 carry. Now offline, I'm averaging 2.5 left, and I've got a standard deviation of say 16 yards here. So I can deviate 18 yards left and 14 yards right. That's a 30-yard space. That's your fairway, isn't it? That number, think about it, that's 30 yards I could improve. So if I improve that standard deviation by 2 yards, that's a 4-yard standard deviation brought in. Bearing in mind finding 4 to 6 yards front and back, which we've already established will make minuscule difference to your strokes gained, to your how many shots it takes you to get down. Where keeping the ball in play compared to out of play has a huge value. That's the bigger number. That's the one. I mean, in the comments down below, is that a number that you understand, one that you've seen, one that is talked about in the many YouTube videos that are put out there, in the many fits, and some of the fits that you've had? Is it more that distance number? Is it the mean accuracy, which I could not hit that mean? Like I could not hit one shot to left if you think about that. But my standard deviation of that mean gives me a little bit more of an idea of if the ball was in play or not. Now, what's going to affect that number? The main thing that's going to affect that number is you. I mean, the biggest thing that will affect that number of left and right misses is that. The shot pattern of strikes, that's going to be massive. Your path and face the path delivery. Your ability to deliver this club, I think, is sometimes taken away. Nothing improves that standard deviation number as much as a good lesson and a good understanding of how to control it through start directions of where you should aim for your normal patterns of misses, those kind of ideas. But if we're going to look at the club, let's start with, what about this? The shaft length might have an effect. This is an extreme. This is a 48-inch driver, just as an extreme that I was practicing with. So where this has other benefits of allowing me to maybe move it slightly faster, if my standard deviation starts increasing and my distance isn't noticeably further, like we're talking 30 yards-ish. So the longer drive here, same ball speed, strike pattern not as good. Club head speed the same, but I did get close to the 113 miles an hour. So it's a bit more practice with the longer club. I feel like I could hit it further. Standard deviation now is 28 yards of 19 right. So I'm like 50 yards right at times with this club to gain, well, maybe a potential 5 to 6 yards, but that's pushing it to the extreme in the shaft length. If I'm not looking at standard deviation, if I'm not trying to bring that in, I'm not really testing. What about draw drivers? Maybe they can bring in your standard deviation. And when we talk about draw drivers, I don't mean all of a sudden you're going to be a fader who starts hitting a draw, but any club that might reduce curvature, so how much your ball curves in the air, well, you'll naturally gain a few more yards, and arguably less curvature from the average golfer allows them to be straighter. Now, I would say, in my opinion, not enough golfers are testing certainly draw-weighted, heavily weighted base drivers, definitely with so many people losing off to the right. Again, it might mean you still lose them off to the right, but if they're curving less, you can literally just change your aim, find a little bit more in-play shots, and maybe your scores will come down. So my shortest driver here, 158 ball speed, 274 carry, compared to 278, you know, there is the 4 yards of extra distance. But now a standard deviation of 18, a very small data capture set, but I feel like I've got 3 of my worst in there. I reckon I could absolutely keep this under 20. It's 4 yards shorter, but it's 10 yards less standard deviation, which is 20 yards left and right. That is a massive gain over those 4 yards, which so many people would look at. These things might help your standard deviation. You might find a better feel with one. You might find that you've got easier control of the face with a lighter one over a heavier one. Just thinking these things are about pushing distance. I mean, I've seen in extremes 4 or 5 yards extra distance from one shaft to another. Standard deviation left and right, subject to how you feel it moves through your hands, what you think happens with it, and how you then in turn deliver it. You might see 4 or 5 yards difference, 2 yards, which again, remember, is doubling up left and right. There can be big gains there. Then you've got things like changeable weights, which is similar to the draw driver. You might want it more out in the toe, you might want it more in the heel, you might want it more neutral. These ideas will help bring in that standard deviation. Even down to ideas of grip size, which will make the club feel very different from a very chunky grip to a narrow grip. Trying to bring in standard deviation numbers, remember, is doubling up your gains. Trying to hit the ball further, which is the general number people are looking for when it comes to driver fits. Well, the biggest thing that's made me hit the ball further is me. It's moving this club head speed up into the 110s, 111s, 113-ish, getting the ball speed up 162, combined with the strikes. The north and south gains with these, again, like the caveats, unless you've got really old drivers and you've changed your swing and you're delivering wrong lofts, they can be manipulated. But the north and south gains, hopefully we're starting to understand, they're very, very small. And unless you can move them on 20 or so yards, which is something I've done, I do think with all the talk of distance at the moment, me included, you know, I'm posting pictures of ball speeds and what have you, that I've not stopped looking at my deviation with the extra yards that I put in. And to be fair, with how we stand at the minute, without taking this out on the golf course and playing for any period of time, I have no idea if it'll actually make me better or worse, or keep me the same, because what I gain in distance, if I then lose in standard deviation, you might find that I'm pretty much averaging out. Your average club golfers bringing this in is just got potential for huge improvements. So with distance being such a big thing at the moment, and obviously it's being so talked about, I'm talking about it loads and I'm trying to gain distance, but remember, maybe for your average golfer, you might find from, you can see there the standard deviation numbers compared to short and long gains, depending on what you're doing to gain distance, so how much you're changing you compared to how much you're trying to look at equipment, you might find there's much bigger wins if you can bring this in and short and long, just let it be what it will be. Now, again, at the same point, caveat, like don't let that take away from you trying to get fitter, stronger. That's just health-based great advice. And also there are huge gains for most people. My body in particular is like 1 at best out of 10, and I've probably worked hard to get it to like a 3, to get it to a 7 or 8 out of 10. Like my distance would shoot on huge, and so would yours, and then my fitness levels and stamina levels, those kind of ideas might raise up as well. Distance is important and there's value in it, but there's no value in it if it's making you hit it much further offline. And that doesn't say that hitting it further does make you hit it offline. Remember, they're not solely connected, but just for your average golfer, making sure that ball stays in play, if those penalty shots show, well, 4 shots gain. If I could gain 4 shots to every student I've ever taught, I would be the best coach who have ever lived. In the comment section down below, let me know what you think. Hit that thumbs up button if you don't already. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. See you in the next video.